All right, welcome everybody to our latest Between the Races podcast on the mxvice network. Thank you everyone for listening and supporting the site. We really appreciate it. First, I'd like to thank our sponsors for this episode in Fly Racing. Fly Racing is excited to celebrate its 25th anniversary in 2023. Led by the revolutionary Formula S helmet featuring Rheon technology, Fly Racing continues to push the boundaries of product, performance and design. We would like to thank our loyal dealers and customers for 25 incredible years and look forward to the next 25 and beyond. Check out the new line at flyracing.com, at Fly Racing USA on social media, and all our athletes at worldwide motocross and off-road events in 2023. So jump on it and check that out. This episode, we're back with a great man, Jason Thomas. How's life and how's 2024 preparations going, mate? The SMX shows are pumping and I'm sure you're pretty busy at Fly in preparation for it all.
Yeah, and in theory, this should be the one of the slowest times of the year. Maybe you could argue, the end of October would be slower than now, but it doesn't feel like it. We're having a big American holiday with Thanksgiving this week, which means a lot of people are away from work and the industry is pretty slow. I'm just trying to enjoy that and have a little bit of a holiday myself because I just know how this goes. I've been doing it way too long. And if you don't take time to enjoy it right now, you're going to really wish that you did when January rolls around because, the way the world schedule is, and especially for me, trying to, I'll do all 31 SMX rounds, and then I'm going to try to squeeze in a few MXGP rounds. You just don't really get a break for the next 9 to 10 months. So it's a really important time to kind of force yourself to disconnect and recharge a bit.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Well said. It's been a pretty grueling schedule for you, 2023, that's for sure. And then your attack on the nations at Madeley should be exceptional as well. So it'll be another big one, mate. But yeah, thanks for taking the time to join us. And I guess we'll start with the Paris Supercross. Obviously, it's sort of like an exhibition race, but I reckon there was still quite a lot of value and sort of insight to be extracted from that, the iconic race, obviously, in its 40th year. So obviously, Jet, pretty ominous for A1. It's sort of another testament to the skills, the adaptability, just everything, the technique. It was pretty exceptional how he could make up those differences in the sections, even on such a small track like the sand and the whoops, especially with the sand carrying the momentum through there and wheel tapping those little sections just to get every little ounce of extra speed while still making it look so effortless, mate. So I guess your takes on it. Him and Hunter had some pretty awesome battles, and Hunter was definitely probably exceeded expectations with that effort and just looked really connected and planted and stable, except for that crash in the whoops, which could have been really bad if those tough blocks were there. So nice little battle potentially simmering when they hit the track at A1. They'll find themselves a lot throughout the season, no doubt. So just some of your takeaways from Paris there too, mate.
Yeah, I thought they were both great. I was curious to see how they would both look because I've written about this a little bit. I've talked about it on my own personal podcast. I didn't think that they would come in very prepared for this race, and that would be on purpose because if you really look at their schedule, similar to what I was talking about, if they don't purposely take some time off after Motocross of Nations and before this Paris race, like when are they going to take time off? Because I'm sure they're arriving probably back home today or maybe yesterday, and maybe they'll celebrate the Thanksgiving holiday, maybe not, but it's pretty much go time for boot camp and all the preparation and the work that has to be put in now that's going to allow them to be their best self in January, February, March. So I'm sure they would like to kind of hang out a little bit more and take some more time off because it got cut short preparing for a Paris Supercross. So it's a really weird thing. And if you ever wonder why guys like Eli Tomac or Carmichael or these guys never raced, Barcia, they really didn't do Geneva. They would go to Barcelona. It was because of this variable. If in reality, coming out of Motocross of Nations, Jet and Hunter should have taken a few weeks off and not really ridden, do some maintenance stuff. Like you don't want to get wildly out of shape and gain weight or anything, but you certainly don't want to be locked into your routine and be, the mental aspect of this is just as important as the physical, and they need to disconnect for a little bit and they need to just allow themselves to unwind so they don't suffer burnout. They need to heal those nagging injuries, which was certainly important for Hunter because he was barely able to race Motocross of Nations. So I'm sure it was a little bit of a compromise of, okay, we get back from France for Motocross of Nations. Let's take some time off, ride some. And for Hunter, even, he's got to get used to the 450, so it's a little bit different. But you want to try to find a balance between we didn't overexert ourselves on preparation for Paris, but you also don't want to come in and be unprepared or crash because you're super rusty or anything too. So it's a really delicate line that I think they had to try to walk. But to your question, I was very, very impressed at how sharp they were in the face of that. And it didn't really look like that they had taken a lot of time off or came in unprepared. So now the question is, knowing that they looked that good in the middle of November, how do they approach the next 6 weeks, right? Because I would have preferred, and this is going to sound weird, but I would have preferred for Jet to look a little bit off at Paris, just look a tick off, a little rusty, just kind of not hitting his marks, like maybe win, maybe lose, Kenny beats him some, but not dominant. I would prefer that, because that would tell me that he had taken the necessary time off. He was really trying to take a break so that he could really go back in and apply himself for 2024. Now, playing devil's advocate to that theory, someone could just say, well, yeah, but that's just how good Jet is. Like, he did all those things and he's still this damn good. And that could be true also. So we'll see. Time will tell. 2024 is going to tell this story for us. But I really didn't have very high expectations, and both of them exceeded those with pace and consistency and just overall performance. They were really, really impressive.
Yeah, it's an excellent insight there, mate. And it's definitely something they need to, take stock of, because obviously, how hard is it from your perspective to adapt to, I guess, the 250 schedule to that 450 schedule where there's all the Supercross rounds, and then obviously the motocross, then the SMX, and then they'll probably be doing the nations as well. So it's a lot to take in. Is it a tough adjustment for 250 riders to step up to that full-time 450 program where it's a lot more brutal, a lot more grueling? It's every single week. So how do you think that goes, and how hard is it?
Yeah, I think it is really tough to be your best for that long of a stretch. And when you factor in the expectation that is placed on Jet's shoulders, because Jet, I don't believe himself that he believes that it's okay to lose right now. And most of his fans, if he loses, they're like, what happened, right? Well, sorry, it's tough to be perfect when you look at how competitive this field is right now. So him being his best self and being able to give a world-class performance week in and week out for, let's say 31 out of 35 weekends, that's asking an incredible amount. It doesn't matter what, if you look at any sport, American football, whatever, teams have bad nights, bad games, bad performances because of that. It's really hard to maintain that just 1%, level performance, like the very, very top. So that's going to be, I don't know what to expect with that. I just hope that they take it in stride and understand the big picture, and you don't have to go 17-0 in Supercross, right? Like, that's not, to me, that's not the goal, nor it should be. The goal should be to win races and be in the championship fight, and, down the wire, you're your best coming into April and May. So it's going to be a learning experience, and I think for Hunter, he doesn't have the expectation that Jet does, so he can kind of take things as they come. Look at his younger brother, which is strange to say, as kind of like, okay, you're going to take the brunt of this expectation, and I'm going to sneak in under the radar a little bit, try to snag some podiums. And if a win pops up and I can be opportunistic, fantastic. But you're going to get all the spotlight. You're going to have, everyone staring at you every weekend. And maybe that's exactly what Hunter, the best setup for Hunter and the best chance for him to do well, because I'll be honest with you, he looked better than I expected in Paris. So maybe this is going to be exactly the right setup for him.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing to follow. And yeah, well said, mate. Obviously set the bar so high, but like we saw last year with the Supercross championships and MXGP, MX2 championships, just being consistent, being healthy and being there is half the battle, isn't it? So if they can do that, you never know where they stand. And yeah, with the decimated field and, especially Supercross last year, it'll be really interesting to see how it all pans out. And I wanted to also get your thoughts on Webb. I guess that was maybe the kind of performance Hunter might have wanted to stay under the radar a bit as he maybe got used to things. But yeah, Webb, you probably wouldn't have expected maybe that Hunter would have beaten him so emphatically. So obviously still early stages for him, hasn't done a lot of racing in the second half of this year, especially. Just at this point, I'm imagining just getting an idea in what directions he wants to go. Got on the podium basically because of Kenny's uncharacteristic crashes and just didn't look that comfortable. But yeah, I think he's just making a lot of fork adjustments. He was speaking to your mate Steve afterwards in the post race. Just wants to get up the intensity, get up the fitness, and then sort of be primed for A1. It's definitely a building situation for him. But yeah, back on the Star Yamaha. Obviously, he said that he was a lot happier in the Whoop, so that's obviously a positive thing. And yeah, lots to work on. But how was that from your sort of perspective? I guess Webb, and you can touch on Roczen as well.
Yeah, Cooper looked okay, but I really think he needs to, and this is something that I think hurt him last year. He's going to have to ride and practice with some riders that are faster than him, because when I watch him at the races, I watched him on press day, like some of the videos that came out from press day at Paris, he just looks slower than the other guys. And it's not that he's not still a competitive racer. I just see the intensity and the way the other guys are attacking the racetrack, and he doesn't have that right now. Now, that doesn't mean he won't be able to find it before January, but just when I'm watching him, he looks a little complacent. He doesn't have the aggressiveness. He doesn't have kind of the innovation on the motorcycle that when you watch Jet, he's really attacking the track. Like, the track looks very basic to him, where Cooper's kind of riding it and allowing things to come at him. It's just a very different optically looking thing. So that's what I see with Webb, is he just needs to find some pace. And the only way that I know that there is to find pace is to go practice with people that are faster than you. And sometimes you have to swallow your pride and say, you know what, I'm going to get my butt kicked every day practicing leading up to Anaheim. But guess what? When I show up at Anaheim, I'm going to be a lot faster than I was 6 weeks ago. So we'll see what that looks like. But there's a strange dynamic there, because I think this is what happened last year. We talked about this, at the beginning of last Supercross season, but the way that these practice facilities are structured, everybody kind of gets locked into their own facility, and they practice with the same guys day after day after day. And you think that you're going really fast. And I think that's what happened with Plessinger, Malcolm Stewart, Christian Craig, and Cooper Webb last year. They all thought they were ripping, right? Like, they thought they were on the cutting edge of pace, and they were super ready coming into A1. Come to find out, none of them were fast enough. So it was like fool's gold. And they were all, I think in a fantasy land of what the pace was going to be. Like, they thought they were all pushing each other and really prepared. Well, guess what? The pace that you needed, the pace that Eli had and these other guys had, was a lot faster. And you just fooled yourself into thinking that you were actually ready. So I think that's where maybe because Cooper's switched over, he's up at the Monster Yamaha Star Racing track now in Tallahassee, maybe practicing with some of the 250 guys. If Hayden Deegan ends up coming back there sometime in December, just get with some different guys that can show you a different pace and show you some different intensity and aggressiveness, because that's the worst feeling. And I've done it. I've been there. You come in and you think you're ready. You've done and it's not about whether you did work or not. You did an insane amount of work, but you come in and you just realize way too late that you are nowhere near where you need to be. And it's too late you're not going to find a second or two a lap on race day. That needed to be done in November and December. So that's just what I see from the outside. It looks like he's in that same spot where he just doesn't have that race speed intensity. The last thing I'll say about it is somehow he was able to find it, right? And we saw him come around sometime in the middle of the season. He started getting faster, and he was actually a championship contender going into the last few rounds. So he needs to remember what he felt like in the first few rounds, and he just didn't have the pace of Sexton or Tomac. And he needs to, okay, I've got to push my boundaries. I've got to push the limits. So when I show up and I'm doing a 51-second lap time, and those guys are turning like 49.7s at Anaheim, I've got to be able to wait. I've got to have it inside me, and that form built up over this offseason to be able to, I can turn it up too. Like, I have it deep down. I have that intensity, and you're not kind of scratching your head and trying to tinker with the bike on Saturday. So that's where I saw Webb. It just looked that same way all weekend. He just simply didn't have the top end speed to go with those guys when he needed to or wanted to. And then, to your question on Kenny, I thought Kenny looked great, but I expected Kenny to look great. And that's kind of the opposite of where I thought Jet would be versus where I thought Kenny would be. because Kenny's coming off of a lot of racing. You know, he raced Motocross Nations, then he went straight into preparation for Abu Dhabi, goes to Paris. He knows he's got World Supercross on the back end of that. So he's kind of been like almost in season mode, lots of practicing, lots of prep, lots of testing. So I expected him to be super sharp. That wasn't a shock at all. You know, the crashes in the final race were a little bit of a shock, but the rest of it, that's where I expected Kenny to be. And conversely to Jet, what does Kenny's mid-season form look like? Because he's putting in so much work right now to be his best, right? And I always feel like it's a game of balance of, do you want to be your best in November and December, or do you want to be your best in March, April, May? And you have to fundamentally change your training schedule around that, because it's not possible to physically peak year round. And it doesn't matter if it's Supercross or bodybuilding or Olympic sports or whatever. There are certain times in a certain way that your body's going to peak. And if you just try to hold that forever, you're going to get tired. Your body's going to stop performing at that high level. So that'll be an interesting conversation you and I can have, say in April, and see what Kenny's form looks like after kind of wanting to be his best form right now.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Obviously, quite a unique schedule for him this year. Sort of obviously did the Supercross and did just this one outdoors, and then did the Nations, and doing the World Supercross. So it's an interesting one, probably something that you have to be monitoring all the time with the training load and this kind of thing. And just, where you want to peak. That's a really great point, mate. But on the topic of Webb, it's sort of interesting. You don't sort of know what version you're going to see. And maybe it was a blessing in disguise, that sort of, I don't know if you call it a status check, recalibrate the focus at Paris, just to know where he needs to be, because those guys are probably going to be, as a couple of the fastest guys out there. So, and obviously not having Tomac to train with, because he essentially does his own thing. How exciting is it to see Tomac back? And I guess he's a bit of an unknown, but you expect he's going to be super fast and doing his own thing. He's on the grind, putting the work in, and it'll be also a pretty cool story to follow how that sort of dynamic with Tomac and Webb, obviously two sort of alpha guys that both think they're the best and know they're the best and want to win. So it'll be pretty interesting to see that one sort of play out, because they're probably not the most sort of friendly guys in that race environment. They both sort of just head down and get the job done. So how do you see it playing out? It'll be a cool subplot to follow, won't it?
Yeah, I think they'll be okay. I really do. And Jason Wygant and myself were kind of talking about this. What does that look like? Two alphas in the same truck and things like that. But both of them are consummate professionals. And I don't think, Webb has tried to play games with Eli in the past, and it had zero effect on Tomac at all, right? He didn't even blink. It didn't phase him, nothing. So I think Webb has learned who he can play those games with and have an effect, and who he can't. And to be honest, I think Cooper feels like he has a lot more problems than just Eli Tomac right now, right? He's going to have to deal with Jet Lawrence, and Kenny is back on form. And there's a lot to unpack there versus just two guys going for the championship and they're in the same truck. That I don't believe that's how it's going to be. Obviously, Chase Sexton is going to be incredible. He's a reigning champion. So if Cooper Webb is spending his days and nights worrying only about how he's going to get inside Eli Tomac's head, I think he's kind of missing the plot a bit. He needs to worry about being his best self. And, if anything, those two should be working together to find pace to go battle the youngsters. And I don't think they will. I doubt they'll practice together. But I could see a world where that's their best plan, is to ride together and feed off of each other, because they're both older. It's both, it's challenging as you get older, especially for Eli coming off a big injury, to find that intensity and find the new techniques that are going to allow you to go faster. That young riders, that's what they do. They innovate and they bring new ideas and new ways to attack racetracks to the table. And I firmly believe that's why Hayden Deegan is at Eli Tomac's, has been at Eli Tomac's property riding. And so Eli can watch him ride, find that intensity, have someone that is not a risk to him, but because by the time Hayden Deegan ever rides a 450, Eli will be long gone, right? So there's no animosity there. They can truly push each other without that feeling of, I'm giving this guy too much of an edge, right? I don't have to hold anything back. I don't have to hide anything training-wise. I can lay it all out there, and it's only going to benefit me. And that's kind of what that point I was making about Webb, that's what I think he needs. So to your specific question of how does that work inside the same truck, I truly think it's going to be fine, simply because there are too many other variables at play for them to be solely concerned about each other. The only caveat would be if somehow, Jet hurts himself or is not. That's the only way I could see it. He's not going to be ineffective. So he would have to be hurt. And maybe Sexton is off or hurt or something, and it just came down to those two. Then it gets really interesting, right? Because you have this inner truck battle. But I truly think there's way too many other guys to be worried about to allow that to creep in. If your first thought is like your teammate, I got to beat my teammate, man, on a championship level, I think you're going to really be missing out on what's important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose those elite guys, they're used to sort of that team within a team vibe in those big factory teams when you're against guys that you're competing for wins and podiums. So it was interesting to see sort of Chase Sexton moving on to him. He was mentioning on that podcast with AC that, it was a bit like that at HRC, the Lawrence brothers. Obviously, Jed especially had their sort of guys. He had his sort of guys. And obviously, he said they got along fine with them, but it just wasn't the sort of framework that he was that sort of into by the end of it. So it's always going to be interesting to see how that plays out. Obviously, he was really happy about KTM moving there. Obviously, he said he knows a lot of guys there. They obviously do leave no stone unturned as well, their approach. And probably be pretty cool having a teammate like AP for him to keep things light and fun as well. And he's obviously not going to be the every guy winning races. Obviously, he's got the speed and the capabilities to win races, but should be a bit of a switch for him. And how do you think he plays out on that KTM? It's going to be just fascinating to see it unfold, isn't it?
Yeah, it'll be interesting. And I think that they're going to roll out a new factory edition KTM for him. I think that's why there's not much out there in the way of social media, not much video, not many photos, because I think that he's spending most of his time riding the new model that will come out sometime in the next month. And I think that was critical for him to end up signing that deal, was that they were going to make some chassis adjustments on the new frame from all the complaining that the Husky guys and the KTM guys had over the past 18 months. So yeah, I do think he'll be great. I think that new bike will be considerably better. They'll adjust, and I'm sure they were hard at work trying to address the things that needed to be addressed. But once that chassis came out for the 2023 model, there wasn't much they could do, right? They were stuck for quite a while. So I'm sure they really wanted to get this one right. And I'm sure Chase got to ride it several times to make his, end all be all decision to sign that KTM contract. But he should be great. He's a fantastic rider. Sometimes, a lot of it can be in your head. It doesn't have to be a fundamental machine change or anything. It can just be, hey, I need to be in a different place on a different bike around different people and get my mind right. Because from what I saw, and I was pretty up close to it, he was really unhappy at the end of last season. He just didn't want to be on that team anymore. I think he felt like that was now the Lawrence's team. And I don't think you can blame Honda or blame Chase. For Honda, you look at their future of these two brothers that are so captivating and have so much potential. And you couple that with the fact that myself, and I'm not involved in these teams. I heard in the summer of 2022 that Chase Sexton had already either signed or was given a letter of intent by KTM for the 2024 season. So if you're Honda, how are you going to respond to that? You're going to be all in on Chase when you've got a whole year and a half left on a contract and you're already signing or attempting to sign with another team? Like, that can't feel great either, in the midst of trying to battle for that 450 Pro Motocross Championship. That's when all that was going on. So I think there was a lot of push-pull there. Depending on which side of the fence you're on, you likely had legitimate reasons to be a little miffed. I could make a case for either side feeling the way that they did. But some things, they come to an end for a reason. KTM really needed Chase Sexton. I think, this was the perfect fit for KTM to get him. So that works really well. And if you're Chase, you're like, yeah, I don't want to be under the same truck with Jet and Hunter on 450. I don't want to do that. So sometimes things happen for a reason. It was interesting for me at the finale at Ironman and then going through the SMX races to kind of see take the temperature of the room between Chase and Honda. And I truly felt like the Honda guys were really bummed because you think about Sexton, he's been on a Honda his whole career. He is a Honda guy, amateurs, professional, won 250 titles for them, breaks the streak of Supercross titles going back 20 years, right? He broke the GOAT streak, or the curse anyway. That means a lot, right? And I think he was one of them. He was a Honda guy, and for it to end on a not really amicable basis, I think left a scar, and I don't think they felt great about it. So yeah, that's, it's a bummer. Things always end for a reason, and sometimes they don't have to end well. They just end, and but yeah, I do think it's for the best, and because like the points I laid out, when you look at where Honda's trajectory is going, it feels like they're all in on this Jet Hunter brother thing. And then KTM really, really need a Chase in their life because they need that guy that can win. So yeah, it probably was for the best. You just hate to see really strong partnerships that are decades long end on a sour note. And I think it did.
Yeah, it sort of wasn't ideal in a lot of ways, but it'll be really cool to see it play out. Would you have him as your favorite at this point? Would you have Sexton, Tomac, and Jett as your sort of top three heavy hitters? Obviously, there's so many unknown, and a lot of winners will probably be laying it down. It'll be pretty cool to see, mate. So I guess, would that be your top three right now? And do you have any leanings towards one or the other?
I would have Jett as my favorite. He's just been so impressive, and I think he's only getting better. I think he's still learning. I don't think he's a prohibitive favorite. I think Sexton will be really good too, but you watch those guys race all summer, and then those SMX rounds, Jett just looks like he's kind of firing on all cylinders right now. And until somebody takes it to him and proves that can beat him straight up, or is better than him, or he has a big get off or something like that, I don't see any reason to not pick Jett. And for me, it's just keep picking the best rider until there's a reason to not pick him. The wild card for me is Tomac. I don't know what to make of that, because that's a big injury, and he didn't race for a long time, and he's older. He's not 25 anymore. He'll be really good. Don't get me wrong, but is it going to be the 2022 and 2023 Eli Tomac? I don't know. Doesn't mean it can't be. That's the one I'm the most curious about, is to see what Eli Tomac's form is. Does he right back to up to speed and ready to battle like he was at A1 in 2023? If he can do that, he will have endless respect from me, because to find that level again after not riding for 4 or 5 months, as everyone else has continued to progress, that's saying something. So to me, Eli Tomac is the biggest question mark coming into 2024.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty cool to watch him back out there. And yeah, that age coming back, it's obviously he's extremely committed, and he's not going to come back to get second. He's coming back to win. So watching that unfold will be pretty excellent. And I guess there's some more unknowns with the likes of Christian Craig and Mookie, obviously extremely injury interrupted campaigns this year. So what do you expect from those guys? Obviously, getting the bike comfortable will be the key point, because they both sort of have looked more comfortable in the whoops in previous years. And I guess they'll probably be pretty refreshed, I guess, physically and mentally, to have another really big shot at. And Christian Craig, obviously you were around him at the Nations as well in the SMX. He was there not racing, but I guess he's probably ready for a really good season to stamp his mark on that Husky team after it seems such a long time ago. He won that 250 title now, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I'm hoping for them that what I suspect will be a new KTM model, I'm hoping that they get to ride it as well, which I think they will, because I heard it behind the scenes a lot, that they were just battling the chassis a lot of the year. They just weren't comfortable. You look at where Christian Craig hurt himself and ended up being in the whoops, and this is one of the best whoops riders I've ever seen in Christian Craig. And you could say the same thing for Malcolm Stewart. Malcolm Stewart's one of the best I've ever seen, right? Maybe not every single week, but some of the things he can do, I wasn't really witness to that in 2023. It just looked like he was a little tentative on the bike because he wasn't so sure of what it would do. So I'm hoping that the chassis really turns things around for them, because I do think they're both capable. I think they're both top 5 capable in a really deep field. Now, being a perennial top 5 guy is another story. Like, you have to be head and shoulders better than everybody to do that, because the field is very deep. But I think to see them up there battling, running around at the front of heat races, those are the types of things that we really didn't see in 2023 that I want to see in 2024. Like, be a factor, show that you have the speed to go with the front guys, not get dropped every time and you're like an 11th and a third of the races. Like that can't happen. you're basically a non-factor at that point. So, I think the biggest key there will be, if they get the new chassis, what does that look like? And if they didn't, how much of a stride were they able to make with the old chassis to get them more comfortable? Because I don't think it's a talent thing. I just don't think that they really were able to ride to their potential last year.
Yeah, both them and the team would be definitely looking for a massive uplift in 2024. It's going to be a great one to follow as well. And another team that will probably be wanting more is obviously Kawasaki. New bikes come out, obviously lots of positive feedback about it, and sort of on the right path with it. Should be really sort of great to have Jason Anderson and AC on it. And obviously we want to see them doing well. Hopefully Anderson get back to the levels we saw last year where he was just a winner. And if things went his way early in the season, he could have really contended more than he did. He was just pretty flawless in sections there. And AC, pretty strong building year for him this year. Lots of positives to take, obviously still with those arm issues, which is always horrible to see. And he has his fair share of crashes too, but it's just good to see him out there. He's great for the sport. He's a great ambassador. He speaks really well. He's coherent. He keeps things positive. So another sort of team that we definitely hope for a great year is Kawasaki, isn't it, mate? Do you think we can get those guys back to being podium regulars as soon as possible?
Yeah, I think there's two different kind of dynamics between those two guys, right? AC is just kind of constantly battling his arms, and he only goes as fast as his arms and his grip strength will allow him to go. So that will be the question. We'll have this opportunity in about 2 weeks from now where all the riders come to Anaheim Stadium. We get to go through 2 days of interviews with them and talk to them and have candid conversations. And that's really going to be kind of where I'm at with AC, is like, hey, you've been doing stem cell treatment. Is there a light at the end of the tunnel, or is this it? Like, are we maxed out? Like, there's no way to get better from here. We're just going to try to hang on and get top 5s and top 10s, or are we going to see the magic AC that we've seen in the past? And he will be very candid. He always is. He's going to be truthful. But that's really the main question I have, because it's not a talent thing. It's not an ability thing. It's what is your body going to allow you to do in 2024? And then for Jason Anderson, very different conversation is I'm going to kind of ask straight up, like, what was going on in 2023? Was that a personal thing? Were you just really flat after a great 2022? You had such a strong year that you just didn't have the fire that you did in 22? Or was it, you got married and your wife was pregnant with your first child? Was that, you don't want to use the word distraction. It was probably the greatest thing that's ever happened in his life, but did that take some of the focus off of racing because your personal life, you were going through all these incredible things, right? So I'll have to work on the verbiage there a little bit, but that's kind of it. Is like, I just want to understand from his perspective where the performances of 2022 went in 2023, because it's the same bike, really, the same team, the same personnel, the same Jason Anderson. There wasn't a big injury, but it was noticeably, the drop-off was noticeable in performance. So it'll be interesting to kind of see what he fires back. I don't, for me, I don't have a dog in the fight. I hope he can understand. We're all just genuinely curious, because I picked him to be in the championship fight again. I picked him to win A1, and then it just kind of wasn't there. Like, I was waiting on it all season long, and it just wasn't there. So it'll be curious to see what he has to say about that.
Yeah, I know what you sort of put it down to, what's accountable for that. But yeah, doesn't really like talking hugely, JA, but whatever you can get out of him on those press days is probably pretty valuable, because he's probably a little bit more relaxed with the racing not being on. So it'd be pretty cool to see what he comes up with there. And another man that he knows well on the track is Barcia. And, he obviously had a season that, it started off pretty well. The Supercross was very good. And then the injury is multiple injuries have sort of scuppered him. Obviously couldn't do Paris on the weekend either, but he'll be coming out firing, always isn't those season openers. And he's just bringing the fun and bringing another big name that can win and podium, and who wants to sort of have another really bright start to the year and sort of get that positive direction going again after the pretty rough second half of the year. Do you see Barcia get there? And also Ferrandis, obviously on that Phoenix Honda, that's another wild card thrown in there. Obviously absolute machine outdoors. Supercross hasn't gone so well when he's moved on to the 450, so lots of nasty crashes last year. Do you see him getting it in there in the mix, or how do you see those guys playing it out? I guess top 5 to top 10 to start with and build from there would probably be the aim for them.
Yeah, Barcia's an interesting one for me, because I always look at these early races, A1 specifically. There are two different responses that you get from a race like A1. A lot of guys, I don't want to say they shrink, but they just are like, I just got to get through tonight. I got to get some positive points on the board, stay off the ground, and get out of here, right? I don't think that's how Barcia views A1 at all. I don't think he really has or feels any championship pressure. He's very locked into the moment. It's like, hey, I can win this race. Everybody else is like nervous, freaking out. They don't want to do anything stupid. They have that you can't win the championship, but you can lose it mantra going on. Screw all that. I want to go win this race, right? And he's done it multiple times. And I think that's a lot of why, is because his approach is just so different. Like there's a quote from Grant Langston going back to 2007 where he says, pressure and big moments do one of two things to you. You either crumble under it and you don't perform, or it brings out your very best. There's not a lot of in between for a lot of people in the biggest moments of your life. You either channel it and use it to be your very best self, or it just cripples you. And I think Barcia is one of those guys where he rises up. Like, he doesn't feel all that pressure. He feels like it's an opportunity. And Jet Lawrence is the same way. I've had conversations with him and other people, Lucas Myrtle, people around him. Jet is that person where when the light's the brightest, he's his best. He doesn't feel as nervous about failure. He feels like he wants to be the star of the show, and it really drives his performance. Like Lucas always tells me, like, if there were no fans at the race and it wasn't on TV, he'd probably get 10th because he wouldn't be engaged and he wouldn't care. But you put it on live television, you put him on the biggest stage, and that guy's going to show up. That's what he thrives on it. And I think Barcia's the same way. Maybe the stakes are a little bit different championship wise, but I think that's why you see Barcia do so well at A1 is he just doesn't feel any of those crazy nervous feelings that lock him up or doesn't get arm pump. He goes out and rides his best. And not many people can do that at the pressure cooker that A1 is. Dylan Ferrandis, I just was having a conversation about him a few minutes ago, and man, it's I don't even know where to start. I don't have any expectation because Supercross has just been a wash for him. Like, there's really nothing to even latch onto. You can't say it's been good. You can't even really say it's been bad because it's almost been like a non-applicable. Like, he hasn't raced a lot. He's had a bunch of crashes. He had a really scary one at Houston last year where he was out for a lot of the race. He's knocked out. I just hope that he can find a program and a situation where he's happy. I think that's what's missing for him is he didn't look comfortable at all last year. He just struggled with the bike, struggled with the team, struggled with everything, seemingly all summer. So now he's kind of teamed up with Rick Ziegfelder, who everyone calls Ziggy from Factory Connection, who they have for whatever reason, they just have a really strong connection on translating what's happening with the motorcycle. And then that's really important for a guy as picky as Dylan is Ziggy can see it and he understands Dylan's language of explaining what the bike is doing, and he can then apply changes based off of that, and they're working in the same direction. So I think that's the key, regardless of what the team or bike or anything is for Dylan, is just being confident and happy with the situation. And then I don't have high expectations for Supercross at all. The one thing I would ask is just get through the season healthy, because we know motocross is his best chance to really excel. And he hasn't come into a motocross season fully prepared and ready to go, really, I would say, since 2021. So he kind of needs to get back to that level where he's not worried about injuries. He's not trying to figure out a new motorcycle. He's going to the race to try to win a championship. And it's just been a minute since that's been the case.
Yeah, that's a great point on Ferrandis. Obviously, he's one of those guys that's sort of all in. He doesn't like settling for second. He just wants to win. So it'll be sort of a strange thing to see him maybe try and lower his expectations and still try and get the most out of himself, because he's a sort of a fighter, a real fierce competitor. And on your topic of Barcia as well, obviously having someone like him had so much buzz elevates what's going to go around at A1. And another guy that sort of intimidates others, always keeps guys honest, looking over their shoulder. And like you see, he doesn't really care. He just cares about him and what he's doing on the track at that time. So always awesome to have him out there. Another one that's been doing so much sort of, the off-season hype has just been massive around is Prado. Do you think we see him doing Supercross, mate? Obviously, you in America, you would have heard all sorts of stories and theories. And obviously, he's been doing some interviews and training the Supercross. Everyone's saying, obviously, he looks good. Prado always looks good, doesn't he, mate? He's just so technical and, he always looks sound and he always looks connected and planted. So what's your thoughts on it all? Do you think we see him at A1 and do a couple of Supercross rounds? is that transition too much? Obviously, the calculations are just split second, and then riding Supercross and racing Supercross are two different animals. Seems like quite a massive challenge, even though he gets the great starts, but just racing in that environment in the stadium, there's a lot to sort of deal with, just coming off a few weeks of training this time around. Obviously, he did it many years ago as well, and that's probably looking like he wants to do it in the future. But your perspective would be great to hear on it all, mate.
Yeah, it's going to be an unpopular opinion, but I don't think that Prado should race Supercross this year. I don't think he should do the first few, and my bosses at Feld and NBC will probably not be happy with me if they heard me say that, but I'm trying to think what's best for Jorge Prado. And when I look at it, I just think he would be kind of straddling the middle too much, right? Because he needs to really kind of be thinking about preparation and rest and start working towards the international prep races for MXGP, not thinking about, okay, we're going to San Fran and I've got to figure out the bike and Supercross. And I'm a big believer in pick one and go with it. And what I think he should do is exactly what he's done so far. Come over, ride some Supercross, get some testing in, work on a deal. He proved that he can ride Supercross. I think everybody watched him ride. He can do it, right? He's not going to be awful at it. I think he's shown enough to where his boss, whoever, if it's Pit Buyer or whoever is making the decision, is like, yeah, that's good. We can work with that. Then come full time for 25, right? Go back in 24, defend your MXGP title, honor your contract, be fully committed to that. And then as soon as we finish at Matterley Basin, make the jump, come to America, practice all of October, whatever. You need a little time off too. But then November, December, do your full training bit. I just think the risk of ruining 2024 is too high, coming over for a few races where you're not going to be fully prepared, because I don't believe that he's going to spend all of November and December practicing Supercross like everyone else is. That's what the people he has to race against, they're going to be all in practicing Supercross and living, breathing, and eating it for the next 7 weeks. And I don't think that's necessarily what he's going to be doing. So not only does he not have any experience, he's also going to be behind the eight ball of what everyone else he's up against is doing. So we'll see, right? Nobody's asking me my opinion necessarily that matters on what he should be doing, but that's just kind of how I see it. I think there's not enough upside and too much risk to kind of just be half pregnant with Supercross and not, especially if you're going to make the jump full time. There's plenty of time to worry about that at the end of 2024.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Well said. And obviously it's sort of amplified, stepping straight into that 450 class. There's no sort of getting your feet wet in the gradual against younger riders. You're against the best in the world that have done it for years and years, probably, best part of 2 decades. A lot of those guys have been training and riding Supercross in some capacity. So it's a massive step, isn't it, mate? And you see the Coonan brothers have obviously just announced they're going to stay for a couple more years in MX2 and the MXGP paddock. Obviously a wise move from your end, mate. They just need more time. And, you see the racing, they're only 16, so there's still a lot of immaturity in their racing in some ways, even though the speed's absolutely blistering. There's still a lot to learn for them and a lot of experience to be gained, and just to manage different situations and navigate high pressure situations and deal with pressure and so much. So your thoughts on them as talents? Obviously we've spoken about it so many times on our podcast, but just such a wise move, and yeah, good for the future. And I guess a problem for MXGP losing potentially a lot of their stars of the future.
Yeah, I do think they'll end up here. They want to be here sooner than later. But, the other side of that is you need a place to put them too. Right? You need a home for them in a really good situation in America that's going to work. And it's tough. A lot of teams are locked into multi-year deals and there's not a lot of space. And also, if you're KTM and you're looking at it on a global picture, you need to continue to cultivate young talent for MXGP also. And how do you split that and understand their wishes to come to America, but also want to be competitive for MX2 titles? And yeah, there's a lot to kind of unpack there. I'm very surprised. I will say this. I'll be very surprised if they are still in the MX2 paddock for multiple years. I think it'll be sooner than that, because their contract doesn't necessarily have to change. I think they'll still be on white and orange bikes, but I think they make the jump sooner rather than later. So we'll see if my prediction pans out or not. I think they'll be locked into their paychecks will come from the same people. I just think you'll see them make the jump sooner rather than later.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. It'd be a good one to follow as well. And just before I let you go, mate, as we wrap this one up, any final thoughts? And I guess talking about it, the excitement levels certainly are raising heading into A1. And obviously you got the added new manufacturers coming in and obviously Ducati in the future. So there's a lot of excitement around the sport at the moment and good to see more rides, more factory rides, more jobs for people and just able to stay in the sport longer with better material. So any final thoughts, mate? What's the sort of plans for the next few weeks and how's everything at Fly? Just quickly, if you want to update the fans too.
Yeah, it's incredible to see all these new OEMs come in. It's not something I would have seen because there's a lot of options already, but we'll take it. The more involvement, the better, and it's only going to have more and better options for consumers, and it's going to drive the other OEMs to continue innovating because they have more competition. So, yeah, it's great. More jobs for more people in the industry and riders and everybody. So I don't see a lot of downside as long as the markets can support it. As long as there are enough people buying dirt bikes to make it all work, then so be it. So that'll be really cool. For me, I am going on holiday for a little bit. Just try to recharge a little bit. As much as I was talking about how much Jed and these guys need to do it, everyone else does too. Everyone that's traveling, and it doesn't matter what your role is. If you're traveling to all the races and you have this long calendar, you kind of have to reset a little bit. Otherwise, you're just miserable throughout the summer and towards the end of the series. So I'm going to try to do that and have a little bit of fun and also prepare. Western Power Sports and Fly Racing are a huge part of the Supercross family. So we're hard at work getting everything lined up and, our hospitality truck and everything ready on our end so we can be there and be a part of the big show once again. Product wise, we're continuing to push the Formula S helmet, which has been a huge success for us, really innovating, helmet safety and helmet technology. And, we still have really big plans with that part of our lineup, the Formula and Formula S and where that's going that are really, we haven't told anybody about yet. It's just not really ready for the public to see, but that mission is ongoing to really revolutionize what helmet expectations are. So, we kind of launched the next salvo with the Fly Smart technology, but there's some coming right behind it that I think is really just as impressive. So I have to be careful with what I say, but it's exciting to know that these things are still being worked on and it's not necessarily just us. Like technology is evolving so fast, right? And what, cell phones are capable of and GPS data is capable of, and all those things are unlocking potential for a lot of the things that we do secondarily to it. So it's an exciting time to be a part of really innovative stuff like that. We're thrilled to keep pushing that envelope.
Awesome, mate. Yeah, it's been just such a game-changing product and obviously, elevating all the levels of performance and design Fly Racing, mate. So obviously, thanks Fly Racing for sponsoring this one and thank you again for coming on, JT, and all the best for the holiday, mate. And look forward to speaking again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Ed.